Hi, I'm Matt with Hoboken Horology, and today I'd like to talk about a vintage Doxa sub 300t Sharkhunter. Doxa is a really interesting company because they are the dive watch for divers, and they are very, very collectible in the vintage market. There are certain Doxas that are worth very little money. If you have a Sea Rambler, even an older one, a much older one, and it doesn't have a bracelet or anything like that, you can maybe buy one for $1,000 or less, especially a non-working one. And then if you have, let's say, a very standard looking Doxa, sub 300, but it is one of the prototype models that has a helium escape valve, even non-working, it can be worth a lot of money. So these Doxas are very collectible for specific reasons, but that's not what I'm here to discuss or go into. I'm more going into this specific watch and sub 300Ts in general. And honestly, between Omega, vintage Ploprofs, a Blancpain 50 fathoms, old Rolex Submariners, those three watchmakers were making watches at the same time as Doxa, and they were making dive watches. Arguably, I think the Rolex and the Blancpain come before Doxa, but they were all making watches for divers around the same time as Doxa, and those watches are worth a lot more than Doxas are. I would not be surprised in 10 years, 15 years from now, these old vintage Doxas are worth a lot more than they're worth today. Honestly, it's kind of a secret that I've always kept because I've gone back and forth with vintage Doxas and modern reissue Doxas. So I've owned a lot. I've actually owned quite a few Doxas. But I'm going to go through reviewing this one because I have this one on hand and I'd like to talk about it. I think it's really interesting. There are things on this watch, especially the bracelet, that watches do not have today. They simply do not have. So let's get into a close look, and I'd like to talk through the rest of this video with this Doxa. So here is the Doxa sub 300 Sharkhunter. And what we'll do is I'll just wind this up a little bit so we can get this going. And let me move the hands out of the way. So what we have here is we have, now if you notice on my crown discipline, I actually wind backward first just to make sure I'm not going to strip it or do some damage to the threading. So what we have is we have a cushion case, a pretty standard dive bezel, and a beads of rice bracelet. These are called beads of rice because they're individual beads here. I apologize if this angle is a little wide. I'm actually trying to sit off camera to try to shoot this, and it's actually quite a comfortable way. If hopefully it's not too wide and you can't see the watch clearly. So actually, let me take off my Speedmaster. So my Speedmaster is actually kind of close to the age of this Doxa. So what we have here, what's interesting about this bracelet is this side of the system is broken, this side still works. So when tension is placed on the bracelet, it actually expands. So what you would do is you would attach the bracelet, and this one's a little short, it's actually missing quite a few links. So you'd put this bracelet on, you'd snap this in, and then if for some reason you snagged your watch or it needed to expand for some reason, you'd be able to do that. This side, like I said, is broken, but with both sides working, that's what it looks like. And it'd be easier to show you this with this off. If this was a full bracelet where you had a rather small wrist, we're going to lock this in, and then that pushes in. If we hit a button, we can release it. While you're on the wrist, you can do quick micro adjustments. Rolex does not have that, and Omega does not have that. Doxa on some of their newer watches still applies this. You know what's really odd? This is a little off topic, but actually WatchGecko had a clasp that did the exact same, and I believe it was the same as Doxa. Now I don't know if they got tired of developing the clasp, or if they got in trouble for copying Doxa's design, or to be more positive, it could have easily been something that Doxa was perhaps being supplied by WatchGecko. But one way or another, the only people that I know that has this kind of technology, Tudor has, of course, they have a tension clasp on their Pelagos series, but nobody I know of, you can do micro adjustments while on the wrist. I mean, how incredible is that? Not to mention this bracelet. Let's take this guy off again. This bracelet looks fantastic on the wrist. Like I said, I've owned many Doxas, and one of my other Doxas fit much nicer than this one, but this watch specifically just looks so fantastic on the wrist. There's just nothing better, and honestly, because the head, it's so head heavy, like most dive watches, but the bracelet is so thin, it's just, it fits, it feels so nice, and it hangs nicely. So we have the Black Lung, I should say the Aqualung logo on the watch, sub 300t, Doxa, and a changing date. And the bezel, as you can see, is not painted, it's all been faded or fallen out. This goes 0 to 60. This bezel is a little hard to turn on this model. Most Doxas are not. This is a rare exception where something might be stuck inside the bezel there. You know, these Doxas, especially these vintage ones, these have the vintage bracelets, the vintage look, the amazing, incredible history of Doxa. I mean, absolutely amazing. And it has everything that any watch collector or vintage collector is looking for. Rattly bracelet, technology that's actually not used today, which is a shame. It's better. This is better than most dive bracelets today. And an incredible vintage look to it. This one hasn't really been touched. Nothing on the dial's been touched. It's been left the way it was. So that's why I see these things going up in value. Just handling this one makes me, you know, just imagine the future of these vintage models. So, you know, hopefully if you ever come across one and it's going for a really good deal, maybe you'll think about picking one up. But like I said, this is a secret that I've kept for a long time, and I'm finally putting one on camera, and I'm trying to put the secret out there, let it be known that these are very collectible, and I could see a really strong future for these vintage watches.